Hello and welcome to the Larger Than Necessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 91. My name is Chris.
I'm Euan.
And I'm David.
Where's Pawel?
Don't know.
Is he buggered off on holiday again without us?
It appears that way, but it does mean I can sit a bit closer to the mic, so now I can shout.
Well, it's a mixture of shouting and speaking very quietly. Pawel's a nightmare to edit, by the way.
Like this!
So we've got an exciting board games episode. Oh, what an episode we've got for you.
It's been a while since you've heard us board game.
What a mixture of stuff this is going to be. We're going to go from something new and shiny and something that people are talking about, and then we're going to go for something a bit more fun and colourful, and then we're going to hit the dryness after that. Oh, what dryness we've got.
It's going to be an arid last third of the episode.
We hope you really like dry German Euro games, because that's what we've got for you at the end. But first up, we're going to talk about something that's in the hotness. This is a Kickstarter. The games all started to turn up a couple of weeks ago, certainly in this country anyway. And it's Founders of Gloomhaven by Isaac Childress, who is probably right now the biggest game designer.
And he had to Kickstart for this.
Considering he's only got like 3 games or something, I think that's quite impressive.
He's a big deal.
He is a big deal. No, we're talking about dry Euro games, and I think one of the things about Isaac Childress is that he makes Euro games. Gloomhaven is a Euro game.
Yeah.
Like it's I don't know if people realise this, but I think it is.
Oh, it definitely is.
It definitely has a lot of Euro game sweet spots.
Yeah, I think that's why I enjoy it so much.
Probably, aye. There's definitely a lot of sort of like hand management stuff going on in there, and there's definitely Euro game stuff. I mean, Forge War is the game that I had by him previously. I don't know if that was his very first game. I'm thinking it might be, but Forge War was definitely a Euro game. And this is, I would say, it's a Euro game. Founders of Gloomhaven is a Euro game. Now, Founders of Gloomhaven is it's a sort of, you can think of it as like almost like a prequel to Gloomhaven, but without all the Gloomhaven fighting monster stuff, because this is a city building game. It's where you're building up the city of Gloomhaven from its founding, and everybody's playing one of the different races in the game. We got a bit worked up actually, because we were like, oh no, this is race spoilers. We haven't unlocked these races in Gloomhaven. We don't know what's coming.
That's true, actually. There were ones in there that were, it's like, I don't want to see this yet. Like humans.
What is a harrower?
Yeah. Don't want to know about that. Unless I unlock it.
That's it,
It has to be unlocked.
Spoilers. They didn't even give us a spoiler klaxon.
From our little boxes that we still haven't opened. There's quite a few of them.
We haven't opened any of them. Your Gloomhaven career is slow and plodding. Mainly because we keep smashing our heads against the wall with one particular quest, but we'll get there in the end. We'll get there. We'll defeat that quest, and I think
it's going to be tight.
I'm wondering if in Gloomhaven we've just got these, like, the missions that you have for the characters that you have to complete for them to retire. I'm wondering if we've all just got ones that are just going to last forever, because it just seems that nobody's that close to actually getting to retiring a character yet and unlocking a new one.
Yeah. I can see mine having like a sort of finite thing, but I don't know. It all kind of depends on certain stuff. Don't want to. You can't give anything away.
You can't give too much.
Otherwise,
away,
you have to actually throw your character.
I mean, all
in
I'll say is that mine completely depends on the other players doing stuff. So I'm just sort of sitting drumming my fingers, and I can't say anything about it because I'm just like, well, I'll have to wait for you guys to do something here. Anyway, let's get back to Founders of Gloomhaven. So each player's playing as one of these races that are helping to build Gloomhaven, and what you've got an empty map, which is the Gloomhaven area. Where Gloomhaven will be built up on. There's actually 2 sides of this board that has the map on it. There's the actual thematic Gloomhaven side, and if you flip it over, there's a symmetrical side where it's the same in sort of, because the board's kind of split into 3 areas on both sides, and it's the symmetrical side. Each area is pretty much identical. But on the thematic side, there's a nice river running through. There's a wall, which is, I don't know, presumably some sort of ancient structure. And the players will be putting buildings onto this map. And these are buildings that are creating resources, but you can also put what they call personal buildings down. But these are just like houses that give you workers, because it's a Euro game.
Yeah. Did anyone actually do that? Oh no, I think Chris did.
Oh yeah, I may have put all 3 of my houses down, but I can't remember.
I considered it a few times.
That's definitely helpful.
Yeah,
definitely helpful.
I could see that they were, but I just...
But we'll get to that, I think. We'll get to that. I think the main part of the game, though, is placing these resource building down.
And building roads.
And
you have to
the
connect
roads,
things together.
The roads. So yeah, you're putting these buildings down, and you're trying to connect the buildings to other buildings, so that they can make higher level resources. And any time that you connect buildings up, points are scored. And the owners of the buildings will score points depending on what's going on. That gets a bit confusing, but again, we'll get to that. The main part of Founders of Gloomhaven, though, like how you actually do your stuff, are the action cards that you get. So this is actually an action, like a card playing game, where you have a hand of action cards, similar to a lot of other games that have come on before it. And each card that you play in a turn will give you some sort of, let you do a certain thing. And also, all the other players at the table can then take an action based on that card as well. Now, Dave, I think you have the cards in front of you.
I do.
Yeah, so you can give us a rundown of what these cards actually do.
Yeah, I can. They've all got very, not confusing names, slightly misleading names that give you no idea whatsoever, for some of them, as to what they actually do.
So it's an issue with this game that we'll maybe get into.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's one of the ones, the cards that you will play a lot is called Trade, but basically, despite being called Trade, what it actually let you do is put little influence discs on the board, and that let you get the tier 1 buildings down as well, confusingly, because the buildings in this game are tiered and they're dependent on each other. So you have the tier 1 buildings, which have no dependencies.
Yeah, they just produce a certain resource.
Yeah, they can be things. They're tied to the races as well. This is the other thing. So each race has their own tier 1 building that belongs to them. Like I was playing the Savas, so they get the stone producing
Are they
building.
not the Craghearts?
That's the Cragheart of the Savas.
Oh, okay. I see.
Craghearts is class.
Craghearts is class, yeah. We kept saying this during the game.
So my guy's not called the Tinkerer.
The Tinkerer's is class, Euan.
It's Quattro, though.
So the Quattros deal in knowledge, so everyone gets their own one, and generally only you can place your own one, and so the other ones get handed out and so on. But anyway, you can build these tier 1s, but and that's what Trade does, but you can also get influence in other people's buildings using the trade action.
You're right. That's such a weird name for a card. I mean, you want to I want to kind of call that card like networking or something like that, like just
influencing.
Chatting to people. Yeah, influencing.
The problem is it does multiple things. So.
Resourcing.
Yeah, so I mean, and then you've got things like recruit, which is more straightforward. There are, in addition to all the other stuff we've talked about, there are these recruit cards that give you. Well, actually, they go into your hand and they are action cards that go into your hand, and they do kind of like advanced versions of the cards that you start out with, so additional benefits. But other than that, they work the same. So you can add some of those to your hand with the recruit. You can upgrade, which actually lets you build one of the higher tier buildings or place them on the map.
Again, a confusingly named card.
I mean, there'll be reasons for all of these things, no doubt, but it is initially a little bit confusing. We tended to just think of it, or I did, as the build card. There is no build card, but so the upgrade is the closest thing to it. You also have construct, which sounds a bit like build, and in many ways it is. However, that's for building your other stuff. It's kind of like, you've got these personal buildings that Chris talked about. These give you a worker which you can place on other things in the board. Like you have a race power and you need a worker to to do that, to activate that. But there's also, more importantly, the bridges and gates that let you make connections through the otherwise impenetrable barriers that there are on the road, which would be either the river or the big wall, the ancient wall, because you can't build roads through those. So you have to use your construct card to get through them in order to make connections between the three bits of the board. So those are the cards you have. When you're doing, I suppose we should mention, a lot of the time what you're going to want to do is build these buildings. They're shaped like little Tetris pieces, just another thing going on in the game. And they have dependencies. So you put the tier 1 ones down, and then if you want to build a tier 2 building down, it has to be connected to its two things that it requires. Like maybe it requires metal and leather. I'm just making it up. But
what requires metal and leather?
I don't know. The Bondage Emporium, no doubt.
Yeah, good idea. The Bondage Emporium requires metal and leather.
So in order to place the little tile down, possibly shaped like a T, it has to be connected by roads or in some way to its dependencies. And then once you do that, then the people who own the buildings that it's dependent on get a little payout. So that might be you might own some of them, but it could be other players as well. And then that gives you points. And gaining points ultimately is what this game is about. And connecting things up is the primary way that you do it. So you work your way up through the tiers. You've got the tiers 2, 3, and then the advanced buildings. I can't remember exactly what they're called. The final top tier buildings.
The prestige buildings.
They're the special ones. And you cannot just build those.
I was wondering if the prestige buildings, because this game has similarities to Princes of Florence in the way that the building works. They have the sort of weird shaped buildings. Have you played Princes of Florence, Dave?
Yeah.
You have?
I don't remember a lot about it.
Because in Princes of Florence, each player has their own personal building space on the little player board. I love Princes of Florence. It's a great game. And they have sort of little, like you say, buildings that are like kind of almost Tetris shaped. Tetris block shaped, and you can't place them adjacent to each other without certain player powers, like the builders. And in Princes of Florence, the points that you scored were prestige points. So I was wondering if the prestige buildings were a sort of little nod to Princes of Florence. I know it's a word that's used quite a lot in gaming, but I just like to think that in my head.
Yeah, well, they're very important in this game. But the way you get those down, the way those get placed on the board is by the call to vote.
Ooh.
Which happens when... Because this is one of these games where you have these action cards in your hand, but after you play it, it goes in a discard pile, and you won't get it back until you take a special action that allows you to get all your discarded cards back into your hand. And you have a card specifically for that called the call to vote. So when you do that, you will get your cards back. There's various other things that go on. People get their income, because you have income in this game as well. And then there's a vote to decide on which of the 3 prestige buildings, which are out on the table currently, goes onto the board, and who gets to place it. And you vote using influence.
Yep. And you have little voting tokens, which are quite nice.
Oh yes. Oh, that is quite cool. I do like that, because there's 3 different
really
ones,
like
and you have a little gem that matches.
Yeah.
You've got like a triangle, a circle, and a
Square.
I found yellow gem.
Yeah, those 3
yellow circular
those
gem.
3 well-known gems
For this pub.
So that's how you indicate it's the whole which one you're voting for. It's the whole closed fist. Drop your influence on the table. Influence being another resource, because you have money in this game, but you also have influence, and it's a separate thing in this game, which is slightly unusual. I think a lot of games you would use your money you would use for the voting as well as for buying things, so you have to pay for everything you do. But in this, it's influence, which is gained in various other ways, which I'm not even going to mention. You even have 2 different kinds of influence. It's not enough just to have one. You've got permanent influence and fleeting influence.
Yep. And they can be gained in a variety of different ways, like totally unrelated.
So many ways. But whoever chucks the most in gets to choose which of these prestige buildings goes down. They don't have to be connected to their dependencies. They're slightly different. They just get placed on the board.
In fact, I think it's important that they're not. Because
possibly you might decide to connect it to some, like if you're
the prestige buildings are a bit weird because they just score
as they're connected,
and you can just plonk it down in the middle of the board somewhere and connect it up to all the things that it requires.
Because they'll typically have 3 dependencies, but you don't have to connect those 3 all at the same time in order to build it. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
it's more of a race between the players to get their buildings, as many as possible of their buildings, connected to these prestige buildings, because they're worth more points than
the thing is that's how the game ends as well. Because that's the most important part of the game. That's really what drives the game. It is the prestige buildings, because it's all about which prestige buildings are going to go on the board and who gets the points for connecting them up at the end. When they eventually do. And once 6 of the prestige buildings on the board have all their resources on them, all the dependencies linked up to them, that's it. The game finishes there.
Yep. And they do give a little bit extra points, but you're probably not going to win a game without making some connections to the prestige buildings, but it's not necessarily who connects to the most prestige buildings that will win. It's a way to end the game early as well, though, if you're, like Chris was saying, once 6 are connected, so if you're in the lead, then you just want to get them connected up by any means possible in order to complete the game and seal your win. And that's really what it's about, though. It's making these connections and scoring the points.
Dave, you've made this game sound reasonably simple.
You made it sound exasperating.
You would think so. I mean, it's very straightforward. You just make connections. I mean, it sounds easy. It freaking wasn't.
No.
And this isn't a criticism against the game. Well, it is a little bit, but because it's a good game. But it's going to depend a lot on the gamer, as like what they like doing as to whether they'll enjoy this game or be exasperated by it. I think that's a good word. Like, this is the kind of game that I personally struggle with because of the way the visual connections work on this board, because it's a square grid. But you put down and you put little roads down which are squares, but they can connect diagonally.
Yeah, that's confusing.
And it makes it very difficult for me. Some people will have no problem with it, to look at the board and say, oh yeah, I can see that's connected to that. And I can see it, but I have to look quite carefully.
I didn't find so much bother with that. I found that was okay. It was more that there were quite a lot of different rules for what could be placed where. That was sort of getting like...
Yeah, there are.
And how buildings were controlled or owned, and that, or you had access to, and things like that.
But that's the confusing part of the game. Resource buildings can't be placed adjacent to each other in any manner, diagonally or anything. There has to at least be one road between them.
Your ones can't. You can't place next to your buildings.
Well, yes, okay, yeah. That is a wee bit confusing.
Yeah. Well, see... Yeah.
If you build a building, you can put it adjacent to anything that you already own.
Yeah,
is the rule.
Yep.
And I think that's. I'm pretty sure that's the only building rule, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's things like maybe there's also rules about placing other stuff for not buildings, like the advanced building, not the advanced buildings, the personal buildings. Yeah. One of them is like a little house, the one that gives you a worker that you can use.
These are the ones you construct.
That has to be connected. Other stuff doesn't have to be connected. So it's not super difficult, but they are there. I wouldn't say it's certainly not the worst game we've encountered in terms of weird little exceptions, but it takes a while to get them down. And then you've got stuff like scoring the points for the dependencies.
I still can't get my head around it. I had it at one point and it all just went out of my head because I think I was just overthinking it.
I think it worked. It's strange because it works exactly the way you would think it would work. But then obviously for some people that's not the case.
Yeah.
So to try and address this, they've put this extra number in brackets on the scoring, which just seemed to serve to confuse everybody.
It's a 7, but there's a 2 in brackets.
I think
so
if we just ignored that number in brackets, it is useful if you add up the points a certain way. You're always doing the same thing when you add up the points, and you can use the number in brackets one way. if you add them up a particular way, but you don't have to. You can just do it the way that makes sense to you. The other thing was we were playing 3 players, and there's an extra rule for dependencies when you're playing with 3 players, which didn't help. No, that didn't assist.
Because it just basically made the number in brackets almost stupid and pointless.
Yeah, because it was wrong by 2.
And I still feel that, I think that's what was confusing me, but I still feel like we may have messed that rule up somewhere, but I don't know, because I couldn't figure it out.
I think there were a couple of times we probably got it wrong by 1, but I think we generally had it. I think the way he's done it, it's the wrong way round. The number in brackets and the main point score should be swapped. It's still the same thing. It just makes more sense to me the other way around. But anyway, I mean, there's a reason for everything that happens in these games. It's one of the things based on my experience of Gloomhaven in this and with Isaac Childress, is that he's not afraid to sacrifice elegance for balance. And so there's loads.
That's fair.
There's loads of, like, Gloomhaven there's so many rules in Gloomhaven that are kind of counterintuitive, or you're just like, why is this extra exception there? They'll be there for a reason, like the rules for like line of sight, where you can't fire a fireball through a doorway and have it hit everybody inside the door. No, it only hits the people you can see. And it's like, well, that's completely against, it's unthematic.
It makes no thematic sense, but it makes sense because it balances the game.
It must be there. It wouldn't. Yeah, it's there for a reason, and so he's quite happy to have rules like that. And this game's kind of a little bit similar in that regard. Yeah. Like, you can't use other players' bridges. It's really annoying. But it's critical.
Like, so many times that we played that, like, somebody went, I've connected to this building. I went, no, you haven't, because that's not your bridge, or that's not your...
your
gate.
Your gate, yeah.
Yeah.
And it got really confusing. I think the 3-player thing, with the whole... like, because basically that 3-player thing, there is just a sort of, almost like a ghost 4th player, who doesn't really do anything on the board, but they suck up points anytime you score for something that they have things on. They suck up extra points, not just the amount that's on the tile. So it's
another example of the same thing, because it's like, you pay, there's these extra ghost tier 1 buildings, and you have to pay quite a lot to place them on the board in the first place. And then, in addition to that, like Chris says, they also steal points, and you're like, well, why do we need these 2 things? It seems excessive. But
the problem with it is that because the game has been designed to have all the resources on the table, because it's like, because all the races, there's 8 races, I think, isn't there?
Yeah.
And each race has one of the basic resources sort of attributed to them.
Yeah.
You need to, and at the start of the game, we didn't really say this, but at the start of the game, you get your basic resource and one extra one from a race that isn't in the game.
Yeah.
But because in 3 players, that's only 6. But you need all 8 resources, so there has to be this ghost 4th player where people can build the resources that aren't in the game, but they don't belong to them. They belong to the ghost player that sucks up all the extra points. Yeah. So I think the game has been designed for like 4-player, and I think we should try and play it that way, and try and get the sort of full experience. And I think it's going to cause a bit more cramping inside those areas on the board, because you start to feel like you're running out of space a bit. Even in 3-player mode,
I feel like the emphasis in the game is meant to be more that because you're only your race will be limited to like just a couple of resources that you are supposed to basically share, and the points are it's how you connect up and everything like that, and sort of.
Well, it's interesting because when we initially looked at the rules, I was like, oh yeah, it's one of these games where you can't just build everything yourself.
Yeah,
you have to give
people.
Points to other people as well, and like. Brass, for example, is another game that I've played that's very like that. But when we actually play it, it's not exactly like that, because before you can build a building that relies on a resource that someone else is producing, you first have to use this trade card to get access to it.
That's true.
It's absolutely freaking infuriating. It's like everything is so hard in this game.
And
so you are kind of racing.
It costs money that you're given to that player as well. But the thing is, right, I think
it's a double thing as well. They get money and points.
They get money and points, yeah.
And I'm like, why do they need both?
But I almost feel like that we got that a bit wrong.
Maybe
though.
It's possible.
Like, well, not wrong in terms of the rules. I just think that we were playing it a bit like not the way that it was. Maybe it was intended to be. Because I think the thing is that we kind of let Euan, I think, I don't know, you have the wood and the metal resources, or something like that. Or maybe the Ghost player had one of those. But then, when you made the machinery building that needed wood and metal, nobody else built a machinery building. Right? And the thing is that when you build a building that produces a resource, you have to have access to the resources it requires to build that.
Yeah.
So you have to buy access to other people's things, and we weren't doing that so much.
Well, so I was providing a lot of it.
I was trying to build a machinery building for the entire,
so was I,
the
but
entire game.
But
by the end, I mean, I could just about do it at the end, but I was like, oh, it doesn't really matter now. So,
but by the time that I realised that maybe this is what we should have been doing, it was kind of too late in the game for that, I think. Because I was just kind of like, oh, right, hang on a minute. I should really have built, like, I don't know, this food-producing building here. And, like, bought the access to all that. So that then I'm the one that's producing the food that's going to provide it to the prestige building, for example. That's then going to get, I'm going to get most of the points for that if I do that, rather than just letting there be only one food-producing building that one person's got and they've got the monopoly on it.
Yeah. I think there is an element of, it took us a while to, like, it took me a long time to realise that the roads, how important they were.
Yeah.
And the bridges and the gates as well. So I wasted a lot of turns and stuff that I could have been using getting stuff connected. It's making connections is super important, particularly with this three different parts of the city thing, which we didn't even mention, but it's actually very clever and a key part of the game. There's each of the buildings. There can only be one of them in each of the 3 sections of the city, and that works in a very clever way because, like, it allows you to build buildings that are already there. It's hard to explain how key it is, but it is actually really clever.
It just kind of
it ties the whole game together because it's what makes the connections. It's what makes connecting roads so important.
Yes, I know
that's you have to connect up
true.
Other parts of the city. If it was just the case that, like, Euan's built a machinery building, in another game it would be, oh well, Euan's built the machinery building. That's it. He's the machinery banner, or you'd be like, well, I'll build a machinery building as well. And I'll just use my machinery building, and then Euan is left with, well, why did I even bother building this machinery building? It's only me who's going to use it. So this 3-zone thing kind of makes it more interesting because sometimes you're like, well, I could build my own one up here, but I've got to build the roads. I've got to have the gate or the bridge, and there's just a lot to think about. It was like I got really confused as well, just remembering what was connected to what and what I'd bought access to.
Yeah.
Oh, there is a helpful stroke unhelpful board that you put at the side of the table as well, which anytime you have whenever you buy access to something or gain access to it for whatever reasons, you put a token on this thing, but then that just becomes a mess. You just look at it and go,
you're not even sure why you've done it in the first place.
I can't believe that board is of any use to anybody.
No.
Like, maybe you have to be a very special person, or, I mean, obviously if you play this game every week or whatever, then fine, but, like, to look at that board with all the little coloured wooden circles on it and go, oh yeah, I see this state of play.
I think as well it's not entirely because the location of
it doesn't
the stuff you control is more important. Well,
it doesn't,
and all that's telling you is, oh, you control it, but where
is it? It might not be
Yeah.
connected anyway.
Exactly. So it doesn't. It's not that helpful.
I would have preferred my own personal one of that. I mean, just a smaller one that just for me.
Oh no, not a Dave creation.
I would have like
confusing as hell.
It would have taken up the same
it would
amount
make
of
sense
space.
to only you.
No, just like because that board has everybody's chips on it. I didn't think that was worth it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I kind of liked putting my bits on it just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Just filling it up with colours. That was quite nice. Colours and shapes, but.
That's the thing about Euro games, Euan. I think this is why you love it. It's just all the colours and the shapes. Just they're just everywhere.
Place a shape on a colour,
and you just go and lie on top of it and swim around. Okay, right. We've talked about the founders of Gloomhaven for quite a while now, actually. So
all right.
I want to get some thoughts on it, though. Like, did you enjoy it? Is the main question. I think
so. I mean, like Dave, I was slightly exasperated by the the constant sort of issues with the rules. But I think overall it's quite an interesting game. And I do like that it's just like adds a bit of depth to the Gloomhaven thing, and you've got the proper pieces for each race.
Yeah, those are nice.
Yeah,
the workers, which
which I didn't really bother with.
Well, we didn't really mention the workers, but the workers they only really have one function. You just anytime a prestige building is built, the card for that prestige building goes next to the board, and it has a special power on it, and it's something that you can use at certain points. Like on your turn, you can take a basic action which lets you move workers around or take money or whatever. And but some of those buildings, like, they had some pretty powerful actions on them, because I used them quite a lot compared to any. I think I may have been the only person using them, in fact. But
I went more for the advisors. Because I found
the
some
advisors
of them,
are
I
useful.
basically I picked up one early on to let me recruit advisors for free as an action. So it's like, well, I might as well just go down that route. And there's some quite powerful ones.
Yeah.
Dave, what do you think?
I do like it. There's so much in it that, I mean,
It's a
for
head scratcher,
for some
isn't it?
people that'll be great. I'm sure, and I imagine it all works and is reasonably balanced. You know, you've got your advisors, your workers, but like some of the stuff, like the workers, for example, I'm like, are they adding that much to the game? For me, not really. But I mean, I like having little workers. They are cute, and I like the idea that I can build 3 houses on the board. And it's nice that doesn't just give me points. It actually does something more interesting than that. So it's good in that regard. But it almost felt like a mini expansion, some of these things. That people could add in or take out. But I mean, I did enjoy it. I definitely play it again with 4 players. Now that I know what the game is about, I think it would be...
I think it'd be more fun before.
Yeah, it would just be better as well, because we sort of know what it's all about now.
I think so. I really want to play it again, but with 4 people. I think that's the way it's been intended. I did enjoy it. It was very head scratchy at times, though. There was a lot of just staring at that board and being like, how am I gonna, like, where am I going with this? How am I gonna link stuff up now?
Yeah, I was linking things and then going, oh wait, I've already linked this. It's like, or I'm looking at things and going, why have I placed influence on this building? I can't remember anymore.
Yeah,
it
I
was
had
like
a lot
5
of that.
turns ago. There was definitely a reason why I did this. I don't know what it is. I've forgotten.
I had that exact moment in this game where I would just sort of looked at the board and I was like, why did I buy access to Euan's little building there? Why did I do that?
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember anymore. Because I mean, how long did this game last? Was that about 3 hours maybe?
Yeah,
Somewhere between 2 and 3 hours, I think, that we played. So it wasn't overly long.
No,
compared to some games I've got that are head scratchy.
It would be shorter.
At
than
the same
that as
time,
well.
there's just so much going on in it that you forget what you're doing.
That's what I'm saying. I think you have to. It's not a game for everybody.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Princess of Florence. It's not like if you like Princess of Florence,
No,
here's a slightly
definitely
more
not.
advanced version. It's like you got to kind of like.
I'd just say that
these things.
one aspect of it had similarities, but I think there's similarities.
Well, no, the shaped tiles and I mean, there's no roads, but it's less.
The similarities in this game, like, there's just the mechanics in this game. They're just almost lifted out of other games, if you see what I mean. Like, I mean, the whole, here's your cards, it's action cards, you play this one to take your hand back. I mean, isn't that just what Concordia is?
Yeah.
And other games do this as well. I mean, but it's just like, I don't think there's a lot of overly new mechanics in it, other than, I don't think I've seen the whole thing about, getting access to people's buildings and then you're having to actually pay those people and they get points for that stuff rather than you when certain things happen. I think that's kind of new to me in a game like this. But yeah, like I say, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was very head scratchy, but I would love to play it again because then I feel like I would actually have a better idea of what I'm doing. But also, anytime I say that and I go into a game, I end up just having a worse time than I did the first time because I overthink it. But still, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of Isaac Childress ever since Forge War. So before Gloomhaven and everything, because Forge War is similar. Forge War is not a game for everybody, but I really like it. It's really fiddly. There's a lot of like it's got the tiniest cubes I've ever seen in it, and at some point we should play it and talk about it on here because we keep saying that we should, and we haven't got round to it yet.
That's a good game.
It's a solid game, aye. I really enjoy it, like I say, but yeah, Founders of Gloomhaven. It's a thumbs up for me at the moment. I might be slightly biased because I forked out money for it, but yeah, looking forward to playing it again and having my head fried. Okay, right. Jesus, we spent quite a while talking about that there. Right, we're going to move on to something a bit more colourful and fun. Me and Dave, you played this, and
Bunny Kingdom.
Yeah, we played a 3-game player of Bunny Kingdom, which we hyped up in the last video games episode. Trying to confuse Pawel with what was going on in this game. Because it was all about the theme for Pawel, you know. He's really got to have some sort of lore going on. And what's more juicy lore, Euan, than a bunny kingdom?
That's pretty good.
Where the bunnies are creating fiefdoms.
I like the idea of being named Big Ears by the Bunny King.
Oh yeah, you got to be named Big
Ears. That's the goal of the game.
And you got to get them golden carrots.
Oh yeah.
The golden carrots are your victory points in this game, and that's what you need. So Bunny Kingdom is see, it is an area control game, but it's a strange area control game because there isn't really any way taking an area off of somebody.
No, that's true.
But it's all about this is a hand management game again, and it has a pretty good mechanic. It does a card drafting mechanic where you're dealt a hand of cards, and you have to choose 2 of the cards in your hand to play that turn. And then you pass the cards on to the next player for the next turn. So you're getting a hand of, like, how many cards was it? Was it 8 or 10 or something that you got dealt at the start of every round?
I can't remember, but it's something like that. Along those lines, I might find it.
So yeah, let's say it's 8, and
it's player dependent.
It's player dependent, okay?
Yeah,
Because I think
10.
we played 3, so it was 10. That's right.
No, 12 for a 3-player game and 10 for 4.
12.
Yeah, there's quite a few. You do have a big hand.
It's a big hand that you've got to try and make some sense out of, and then decide which the cards in your hand are the best ones that you can play right now, before you get passed on the next 10 cards from the next person, 8 cards the next person, 6 cards.
It's like 7 Kingdoms, except you play them rather than other games where you go around swapping cards until you've built your hand and then play it. This, you play it as you go, so it's slightly different, but similar thing in that you're not wanting to give away good cards. It's a bit less. It's not so much that there are good cards in this game for other players. It's more about good cards for yourself.
Yes.
And you don't want to, like.
Well, actually, I would disagree with that, but.
Well, it's sort of. It's a wee bit. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Sometimes there are good cards for other players where it's really evident when you look at it. So yeah, there is a bit of that, but it's also trying to remember for coming back round again as well. So remembering what you've seen.
I didn't worry about that so much.
No. Well, it's hard when you've got 12 cards. No, I didn't bother either. But I think if you're able to do that, you'll definitely gain a competitive advantage in this game. I
always look at these things though when you're doing that sort of passing cards on, that you just cannot rely on getting these cards back. So don't overthink that. Just play the 2 best cards that you've got at the time was my strategy. But yeah, Dave, you're a components correspondent this week, so you need to. You've got all the cards in front of you again. So
I do have the cards.
There are a bunch of different cards in this game, but they're mostly location cards, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, the board is a. If we said it's like a grid-based board.
We haven't mentioned that yet.
Yeah, and it's very much a grid in that they're labelled with letters and numbers, sort of like battleship style. So you've got that in front of you, and it's almost empty to begin with. There are. We started with a few of the fortifications.
Yes, there's fortifications. So there's 3 types of fortification. They're just tiered. They're 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, they have towers on them. That's how you know.
And they start empty. So there's some of those on the board, and the board is also sort of split up into different types of terrain. So you've got.
There's like water and fields and mountains,
lava.
Yeah.
But the lava just crosses between squares.
Yeah.
Just to stop you from creating fiefdoms across them.
Yeah. And so you've got that board and you've got your hand of cards, as we said before, and the majority of the cards in your hand will most likely be cards that correspond to a square on the board. So they'll have like, A5 or whatever on it. And you'll most likely have a few of those. And when you play those, you just place one of your little bunnies on the board and begin the beginnings of a fiefdom. Because that's how you farm them, is by having little rabbits on the board connected to other rabbits of your colour. And there's no diagonal connections in this, is there?
No.
No, so it's very easy. Well, kind of. At the beginning it's
easy to see.
It gets busy, but compared to other games, yes, it's very easy to see because they're very brightly coloured. So you've got those cards. You've got the... what else have you got? You've got the ones that let you place new fortifications on the board. You can just put them anywhere. You've got the camp cards. Oh yeah, they let you just put your bunny down on any square in the board that's empty. Because as Chris says, you can't oust anybody, generally speaking. So you can place them somewhere where you don't have the coordinate card for it. And you're kind of forming like a temporary, potentially, fiefdom there, or a temporary presence, because if someone else has that card, that's the one instance when they can kick you out of that space from the camp. And then also you've got the parchment cards, which they're like special victory point cards if you fulfill certain conditions. So you can play those and keep them to the side, and they all have funny names. I've got a couple of them here just as examples. There's like Honey King. This is a sort of Attila the Hun type pun. There's a great...
That's H-U-N.
Yeah,
honey.
H-U-N, not H-O-N-E-Y. 12 carrots, or slices of pizza if you're me. If you control at least 10 fiefs. I'll explain what fiefs are in a second, but there's a few others, like 12 carrots, golden carrots, if you control at least 9 cities. So if you've got a bunny in 9 cities, the cities being the ones with the tier 3 ones with the 3 towers, then you get an extra 12 points at the game. So you can, at the end of the game, so you can collect those. They just go to one side, and those are scored at the end. So you go through all your cards until you've played your entire hand, so 12 or 10 in a 4-player game, and then we score the fiefdoms, and that's the key part of the game. So a fiefdom is when you have a bunnies sort of in a cluster connected to each other, as we said before, but you score them in the harvest phase, it's called, and how does it work? It's the number of towers multiplied the number of resources.
Different resources.
Yeah, because there are also resources on the board. Forgot to mention that. And there are things like carrots
Fish.
is one of them.
Carrots is one, fish. And there are special resources which are rarer. They've got things like pearls.
Yeah.
I can't remember some of the other ones.
Yeah, because one of the other cards allows you... There are resources on the board, but there's another card that lets you put new resources.
Farms.
So they're like farms or mines.
I think they're all just called farms, though.
Yeah.
I think that was a technical term that was used. So yeah, so like you can turn your fish spot into a...
Fish and carrots.
An oyster or pearl diving
Oh yeah,
spot.
there was some restrictions on where you could place them to
Yeah.
an extent. Like the gems had to go in the mountains and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as Chris said, it's the number of different resources that your little rabbits are sitting on multiplied by the number of towers that they have, and that you just multiply those together. That gives you points, and you add those to your little score track. And we go through and do that until there are no cards left in the big... No, that's not quite true, actually.
It's
No,
not.
because you're not guaranteed in seeing every card. We sort of figured that out at the end. No, it's a fixed number of turns. So there is one.
Yeah, because we got
one turn. Yeah, we were like
we got the
slightly
number
confused.
of rounds, the number of turns wrong because we thought there was going to be another turn and there wasn't. It was just like, oh no, wait, that's the game finished.
Why don't we have quite enough cards
Yeah,
to do
we're
another
working-
round?
I was like digging through the box and everything, just like, where's all the other cards gone?
No, I think it was 5 turns. It's something like that. So like with the camp cards, I said you could get ousted by another player. It's actually not guaranteed, and you're also not guaranteed. You know, if you're waiting for a particular coordinate card to add to your fiefdom, it may never turn up. So there is that to consider, but you do. So you don't cover the entirety of the board, but very close to it. There's not that many empty spaces. When you get to the end,
It was
it's
a busy board.
pretty
at the
busy
end.
looking.
Yeah.
Lots of little clusters of coloured rabbits sitting in their various towers and hilltop forts and fortifications. Some fiefdoms larger than others, and I suppose that one of the dynamics of this game is to do with it's only the number of different resources that are in a fiefdom, so you can end up wasting resources if you've got like multiple fish and multiple carrots in your in your fiefdom connected together, then those are wasted because they're not contributing to the multiplier. So you can be too big. But then in our particular game, Ian that won just made
the biggest
mega
fiefdom and just filled it with fortification so that his multiplier was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we let him get away with it.
We did.
Because we kept giving him fortification cards and he kept building them. But
yeah.
the point that
it's so
there was almost a point of no return for that, though, because it was just, we couldn't really stop him from getting fortification cards at some point.
It is so hard.
And any time you got one, he just put it in that same fiefdom. And like, because I think I had like 2 sort of decent sized fiefdoms. Well, a lot of resources that were going to waste, whereas I think Ian just had like 1 mega fiefdom and a couple of tiny ones that he were scoring very little for.
Yeah.
Dave, you were a bit more nomadic, I think.
I decided that, as I normally do,
you were just going to take all the point scoring
to not pursue the most obvious strategy and instead to do something really stupid, which was just to collect as many parchment cards as I possibly could and to try and score them. And it kind of worked. It's actually kind of a viable strategy.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that is...
At the end of the game, it looked like I was so far behind.
Yes.
And like by about 100 points almost. And then we sat down and added up my cards, and I got pretty close to the winning score at the end.
I don't think there was a lot of points in it at the end, was there?
No, and I suspect that may often be the case in this game. It was very, very close at the end.
I think, if I remember right, I think there may have only been about 8 or 9 points between first and last place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was very close because this is a high point scoring game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that is a viable strategy. I think that if you get the right parchment cards and form a strategy around that, then yes, I think there is something to be said for that kind of strategy, because it's not an obvious one. It's definitely not an obvious strategy at all if this is the first time you play this game. But yeah, like you say, you like to pursue the least obvious path to victory that you possibly can. Which always makes playing games with you interesting.
It's just easier. I'm so lazy. It's like, I'm like, oh, I could look at all these resources and plan out my fiefdoms, or I could just take all the parchment cards.
You had such a massive stack.
It was ridiculous.
Like I think I had about 6 at the end of the game, and you had about 20 odd. It was absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that is essentially the game. It's just you're building up your fiefdoms and trying to make them as kind of efficient as possible in terms of the resources that they've got in them without, you don't want to go too mad. There were so many times during the game that I was like, oh, I can take this card because it's going to add to that fiefdom. I was like, no, it's pointless because I've already got this resource anyway. So, no, I'll take something else. But the game's colourful, it's silly. The cards are great. I love the cards. The artwork on them's amazing. And it's all bunny-based stuff, like rabbit-based stuff. But all the terrible puns that they have for the names of some of the characters and things.
Yeah, it's pretty wacky.
They're pretty good. I mean, but like I say, yeah, it looks like, I mean, it's a game called Bunny Kingdom, and the cover of the box, it's all green and blue and colourful.
It's all a bit of fun.
And it's all a twee theme and all that. But it's actually, this is a great game. Like, I really enjoyed this. Like, I tend not to go for those kind of area control games, and I think that this one really hit something with me, because it's not an area control game where you're constantly just battering up against each other and trying to force each other out of spaces. It's more about tactical card choices rather than anything else. It's not about fighting anybody.
It's more slightly more Euro-ish area control type thing, where you're just making connections and joining stuff together on a board. It's not there's no back and forward, no fighting with each other, not really. So I mean, that's going to appeal to a lot of people, and it's easy enough to play. It's not an overly complex game.
No, it's not at all, and it plays pretty quick as well. I think how long did it take us to play? About an hour.
Yeah, if that, and then
it
would be quicker once you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was really enjoyable. Like, I'm glad that I picked this game up, because I was sitting there, like, I saw this game and I thought, I like stupid themes. I like games with stupid themes. I like designers that try stupid themes, or companies that try them. And I thought that this one looked just particularly silly.
I mean, it is silly. I mean, some people like Pawel might complain that it's
not dripping the lore.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of disconnect between the gameplay and the theme, which there is, and they've just tried to play it for laughs rather than justify it.
But I think that's good though, because I think Euro games kind of need that. Like, you can't have them all just being based in the Mediterranean during the Renaissance.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is set earlier than the Renaissance.
When is Bonnie Kingdom set?
Oh, I don't know, but you've got like the Huns and there's Herkingetorix as well. I just saw it.
Herkingetorix, amazing. In fact, I think I
that's not even a pun.
Yeah,
they sound nothing like each other. Yeah, I mean, you would assume that if there was rabbits, it was to do with like breeding or something, and there's none of that really. You're just placing them in.
It's silly, but no,
it's good though.
I really enjoyed it. Euan, does this sound like, because you missed out on this one, but does this sound like your cup of tea? Does it sound shit? All right.
I don't want to play a game called Bunny Kingdom.
You're too cool for that, man.
I want to be up.
There's no cubes in this game. No resources.
I'd say something about ants, something like that, something cool.
Oh yeah, I've actually been considering getting an ant-based game.
Oh yeah,
it's actually quite an old one. Mermies, is it? Mermies? Yeah, I think it's called Mermies.
Gosh, well, there's quite a lot of like animal-based like activity games. What activities animals get up to? Rabbits apparently try and run kingdoms.
Can you blame them?
He's getting into very complicated systems of moving different colours of pollen about the place.
That's true.
Yeah.
You think they'll run out of
good
animals?
Good old waggle dance.
Eventually. And they'll just have to start inventing animals.
Yeah, the animals will run out eventually, Dave.
That's when you play dominant
sobering
species.
Thought, but sooner or later.
Well, thank you. Dave, would you play it again?
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, it is a good game. I'd definitely play it again. It's accessible without being, overly simple.
It looks
it's a bit different as well.
Excellent. Right, that's Bunny Kingdom. Who designed that one?
It's a Richard Garfield game.
Oh, that's of course it's Richard Garfield.
Dickie Garfield.
And it's published by Yellow. Okay, right, now it's time for the dryness, you. Time for the dry. Get the sandpaper out. Go and get the sandpaper.
Get some sandpaper and a piece of old skin.
And rub it.
Yep.
Just rub it. Slowly, not fast. Slowly.
Because we're going to Deutschland.
We don't have a lot of time, okay? So, and I'm kind of glad of this. So we're going to have to do this in about, say, 10-15 minutes.
That's fine, because we probably don't want to get too in-depth about how this game actually works. This is probably good to limit
us on how far into the details of this game we can go. Because we did play D-Macker, and we've played it several things before. It has to be said. I've owned this game for 10, 12, 15 years maybe. And it was one of the early games that I bought. And it was quite a big game back then. Back in those sort of days when I first got into board gaming. It was one of these games that was just like, it's really elegant and everything. But like, this is a game where the theme is politics in Germany. Where you are playing as a particular party, one of the parties that exists, I believe. Mm-hmm. You get a little card that says which card you are, so you can be the Christian Democratic Party or whatever they're called, and you be the Green Party or the Left Party, all these different things. It is absolutely irrelevant what party you play as, because your platform that you're given, your issues and what your opinions are on those issues is completely random. So you can be the Left Party and you can be totally like lowering taxes and doing the exact opposite of everything that you would expect the Left Party to do.
You can have like sort of quite kind of thematically contradictory viewpoints for your party to have, for your policies, based on just like chasing whatever the people of your particular region that you're having the election in, or what they're after.
Lower taxes, raise spending on everything.
Yep.
that was a solid platform, I think, and that's the kind of platforms that you get in this game. So this game is full of cubes, cubes of different sizes, little flat rectangular pieces, and the boards. There's 4 boards, and these represent. Each board represents a different. Are they states in Germany or are they regions?
We would call them like either
Counties.
constituencies or wards, depending on what type of election it is. Because it's not clear. Because one of the things about this game, one of them is that it's incredibly abstract, but the other one is that it doesn't really feel like a general election when you play it.
No,
it really feels like it should be. I called it German. It should be German by-election simulator.
Yeah,
because that's
basically,
sort of what it feels like. Because you don't, as we might be able to convey, you don't get to the end and you're like, yes, I won the election. We're now in power, or we've formed a coalition. It's not like that. It's like, I have improved my position.
And it all leads up to a general election, though.
But does it though? Because at the end, it's all about like points and improving your party membership. It's almost.
But isn't that what it's about in real life, though?
That's it. Like it's like when a party loses an election, but they come out and go, "Well, it was a good result for us," because that's kind of what you're aiming for in this game.
This is true politics, then, Dave, isn't it?
It's all a chess game.
Yeah, but in the abstract. Because it's not a simulator. I called it a simulator. It really isn't.
No, it's not.
It doesn't attempt to. It's very.
I want to know how they came up with the idea for this game. Like, it just feels, because it feels so abstracted that, like, how they decided that this is a game about politics. But there's parts of this game that are like, how do you do it without the sort of political thing? I suppose you could. Because a lot of it is just card matching. And anyway. So you've got 4 boards on the table, and you actually end up reusing a couple of these boards because you play, I think, 6 different by-elections, as Dave's calling it. Yeah. But each board represents one of the wards in Germany, political places. And all you're really trying to do is each of the different boards has like their own, what the people in that ward think. So there's a bunch of different issues. So there's stuff like genetically modified foods, there's stuff like taxes, there's stuff like
military spending,
defence spending, military spending,
social spending, I think, is one of something like that.
Social
sort
security,
of like welfare
or something.
type of thing.
Yeah, a bunch of different things. I think there's 8, possibly.
Each state has 4 of those, and
they're either negative or positive.
Yeah,
and they're chosen at random.
And they're completely random, yeah. And the parties themselves are given random cards at the start of the game. Which sort of match these things. So if you've got a bunch of things matching with a particular state, you're already kind of halfway there with that state. But what you're actually doing in this game is that there are various phases in each round where you're doing certain things. So you can start to buy. You're essentially buying votes because you've got money in this game, and you're almost like it's strange because you're holding party meetings. You're sort of buying votes, and then the number of votes that you get in a particular region gets multiplied by how many things you have matching. But like that multiplier changes because if you are opposing on a certain thing, so if you're opposing on taxes, for example, so if the state says they want to raise taxes, you say you want to lower taxes, that actually comes off your multiplier number. So you want to just buy like lots of votes in particular places where you are matching a lot of things because you're going to score highly for that. And then you're doing other things. I mean, it's kind of strange because the wards have different points as well. So, like the smaller wards, you score less points for those. So, maybe it's not that good an idea to do that in the smaller wards, but it can just depend on the situation in the game. Like, because
there is an element of looking ahead in this game because you've got 4 down, so you can see the 4 constituencies at one time, and you can see their 4 kind of policies and whether they match up with yours. But we're going round them in order, so one of the constituencies will get scored at the end of the round because it's a round-based game. But the 3 others will get scored subsequently. But you can affect them for those 3 other constituencies ahead. So like planning ahead. So it's like Chris says, you might look at one and go, well, that one's a really small state. It's not going to contribute that many points at the end of the game, and I'm not really very well aligned with it in the first place, so maybe we'll not put too much of an effort into, or maybe no effort at all into campaigning in that state. Because ultimately, a lot of it is down to the three things that score you points or votes. In this case, so like Chris says, the policies, and it's like a coincidence factor. It's called how you match up with the policies in that state. The party meetings and the your approval in that state. So you can have a positive approval rate and a negative approval rate. I think that gets added to the coincidence thing and then multiplied by the number of party meetings, which kind of represent you just making an effort and having like actual like sort of like grassroots type stuff, actual party membership, people going around doing stuff, working the state. So yeah, the party meetings gets multiplied with the other two added together, and that gives you your votes. And there's just various things you can do in the round to get those things. You can buy meetings. You just spend money for those at a particular part. You can change your policies.
Mm-hmm.
You can
use the media to try and change the policies inside certain certain wards as well.
Tokens.
Yep. So there's a point where you buy media markers and you can place them on the states, and then if you've got media dominance in that state, you can change one of the policies, flip it from positive to negative. And again, it's abstract because like this, to me, I was like, oh, it's really strange. You're not like setting down a party-wide line for an entire election. I think you've got to just think of it as like playing down or playing to these things. So if this particular state is like very big on like welfare spending,
you've got to talk about that.
You're like, well, even if we're not, if we're a party who wants to cut welfare spending in this particular state, we're going to try and lessen that somehow. We're going to sort of make out that we're not cutting it by that much or whatever. And I think you can sort of explain away the flip-flopping of the various policies throughout the game. And there's other stuff as well, isn't there? You've got your shadow cabinet.
No, the shadow cabinet's hilarious.
Various dudes, and dudettes. Various party members who you can deploy throughout the campaign. You only get to use each one time, and you have to spend money to do it. But they have various effects that you can use on the states, like increasing your popularity. I mean, and different cabinet members do different things. Some give you more media power. Some are more about policies and popularity. So you've got them. You've got the opinion polls.
The opinion polls. In fact, I mean, I said the shadow cabinet was hilarious, but the opinion polls are the funniest part of this game, I think, because it's just there's like a bidding thing, isn't there?
Yeah,
like
you just bid money.
There's an opinion poll in each state, and then everybody just bids money for each one, and whoever gets it, they get to decide whether they want to publish the opinion poll or not, because they get to see what it says, and it's basically just going to change the popularity of the different parties in that ward.
Because you can't buy popularity directly, so this is one of the ways that you can manipulate your popularity.
That and the shadow cabinet, I think, are the two things that will change them. But you can also use the shadow cabinet to change other people's as well. So that is the funny part of the game, I think, is changing somebody's popularity, because it can really mess with their score in a state. If they're really focusing on something, you're just like, nah, I'm going to make the people in this place hate you. Like, and it can really mess with their multiplier, the coincidence factor.
Yeah, because they might have invested a lot in that state.
Aye.
And then if you knock their popularity right down, it makes a massive difference to the amount of votes that they're going to get. So yeah, I mean, but it's so, the opinion polls, you can't see them before you get them. So it's so like, it's very much a gamble. Dumping a lot of money, and then you look at it and you're like, well, this doesn't help me in any way, so I'm just not going to publish it.
I think the few times I got them, there was stuff that was just like, nah, this ends up. I think it puts my approval rating down. I'm not going to publish it.
That happened to me like the last time we played it. Every time I picked one up, I was like, well, this doesn't help me. But you do get something from not publishing it. I think you get to increase your party membership or something. And I mean, it sounds like every time we talk about something, we're introducing something new to the game, and there is a lot going on in DMACR. I think it's fair to say. But it is essentially a game of just like buying certain things at the right time, and like spending money at the right time, and the right shadow cabinet members doing these things, and some things it won't work out because other people can just really mess with you, especially like sort of controlling the media and that kind of thing. It's not just a game about buying votes, and I think that this is where the theme comes into it, because it is a lot of it is just about what sneaky shit do you do behind the scenes rather than anything else. Like, a lot of it is just like, how much influence do you have over the media? How much do you use your shadow cabinet to completely just like mess with other people's crap and just make them out to look bad? And
it certainly paints quite a cynical picture of political campaigning.
It's just soulless.
It's just
driven for money.
It's very Machiavellian, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
it is Demacher.
But I mean, the whole purpose, I mean, and some things, this is why you might go for these lower numbered states, because at the end of the game you actually score for there's another board where you put things, which, like, if you win in a state, for example, so at the end of every round one of the states gets scored, and
everybody gets party membership, whether they win or not,
all that stuff. But like, the issues that are in that state that wins, the person that wins that state can put to them into the national opinion board.
Yeah.
And at the end of the game, you look at the national opinion board and see how much stuff you have in common with it. And if you have a lot, then you're going to score a hell of a lot of points, because those are worth a lot of points at the end of the game if you're matching, particularly the very early ones, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Those are worth, like, the ones that went in earliest are the ones that are worth the most points. Mm-hmm. So there is a sort of long-term strategy going on here in terms of, like, you know, you might not do very well in the States. In fact, you might not win any of the States, but you can rack up so many points at the end of the game you could end up winning completely, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, we can't go too much more in depth into what Demacher is, but I think we've probably painted a pretty good picture here of what kind of game it is. There's visually, it is not good. This is not a good looking game.
It's very
it's dated. I mean, this is an old game.
This is what German clip art looks like.
It's very practical.
I mean,
they don't do the cartoony stuff too much.
No, that, I mean, compared to Bunny Kingdom, let's say, there is a marked difference between the two. It's not horrible though. It's functional.
It's functional. I mean, that is, like I say, it's very practical.
It's very abstract.
A very functional game. I mean, the original game came out in 1986. I did not realise that. I thought this was a 90s game, but
it looks a bit 1986.
But I mean, this isn't a 1986 version that I have. This is clearly an updated version, but still, it is not.
The feeling lingers.
Visually appealing, really. It's very neutral coloured, and you know, there's not a lot going on the boards. But I mean, it's a solid game. It does what it sets out to do. I think it kind of does give you a political feel.
I quite enjoyed it.
You quite?
Yeah. I mean, it's a game of planning. That's the bit that you'll enjoy if you like looking at all these things and planning ahead and looking a little bit at what other people are doing. But it's not overwhelming. You don't have to.
Then having that planning thwarted.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen, but it doesn't happen too often because it's. Yeah, it doesn't happen all. I mean,
there's a potential for quite big shifts in
there can
what's
be,
going on.
But you always get, well, most of the time you get something out of a. That I think that's quite key as well. Is that it's not about winning the state. You get a you get a definite benefit for winning a state, and it's worth going for. But it's not. You'll still get something if you come second or third. You still get the points, and it can be significant. You know, you might do really well. So I quite like that side of it, in that even if you do get sort of screwed over a little bit, you're not like totally like everything's wasted and you're tipping the table over sort of thing. Or at least it wasn't like that when we played. Yeah, and I just liked looking at making a wee plan because it wasn't too difficult, even though the game sounds really fiddly. Or weird. It's actually
a lot of cubes, but I mean,
I think it can be fairly obvious which of the wards or the states, whatever you want to call them, which ones you should be focusing on.
Yeah,
like, because you've got your platform in front of you, and you can see some of the cards of the future platform, the future states that are coming up, and you can kind of say to yourself, "Look, I'm not going to bother with this state too much because that's not like." It's too much work to try and change all the platform and stuff. I'll focus on that state and that state. Maybe focus on getting some points in this state, but not all of them, because I'm not going to get very far with that or whatever. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of planning ahead that can go on in this game, and it can be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it's a very particular type of planning. It's not like founders of Gloomhaven involves a huge amount of forward planning, but it's freaking continuous. It's like full on, and it never stops.
And you forget everything.
Everything's changing all the time, and you're like, oh my god. Whereas this, no, it's like you look at the board and you're like, you know, the state, like Berlin will still be Berlin when it comes round.
Careful.
That's a sci-fi premise if ever I heard one.
I was told to deliver the same number of votes.
It's now East Berlin.
Yes. So yeah, it's like, it's that kind of, and it, even though it is abstract, that little bit of it of like making a wee campaign plan felt quite thematic. So it's not totally dry.
It's not totally devoid, but no, it is dry. It's quite dry, this game, we'll have to say.
It's a good Euro game, I'll give it that.
Yeah, maybe it's the original Euro game.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in 1986. It could well be.
And everything's just kind of warped into worker placement and card drafting since then.
And D-Macker's now looking at all these things going, what are you doing?
No.
This is not what we
I laid out a template for life and you squandered it.
It does have dice though, weirdly.
Is it?
Yeah, the dice aren't really used for very much. It's to do with like gaining party votes at certain points. You can roll. I think this is what you do if you don't publish an opinion poll. I think you roll the dice and see how many party members you get.
Yep.
And that gives you money though. So like having party members. I think in fact the game that we played was not one person was not winning any of the states, but they kept on gaining party member after party member, and they were rich.
I meant to say the other thing this game does is money management.
Oh yeah,
and lots of games have money, but this game I actually felt like I was managing my money in a controlled manner.
Making a budget, David.
Yes, it felt a little bit like budgeting, where I was keeping money aside for like I need like 8,000 for this, 10,000 for this, put that to one side. It was all very like ordered.
Yeah.
And calm.
Yeah. Are you going to bring a briefcase next time?
I might do.
Stand there looking smug like George Osborne.
Get some braces.
Yes, a bowler hat.
Yeah. I mean, again, Founders of Gloomhaven, yeah, there's money in that. You just never have enough.
Yeah.
That's all that was.
Money's a limited resource. Unless somebody else is paying you lots for access to things. Wasn't me. Okay, so yeah, that's D-Macker. Yes, that's by Karl-Heinz Schmiel. Is that published by... Is that Valley Games?
Well, your version of it is published by
The
Valley
version
Games.
I have is published by Valley, but I think that is the most recent version.
Right, yeah.
This, I had a quick look before we started this this podcast about the availability of this, because it's something I never really thought about, was like, is D-Macker a game that's still being made? And it looks like it's very hard to get a copy of it at a reasonable price right now.
Well,
send your offers.
You enjoyed our recommendation of it then.
Yeah, I mean,
search for one.
There is somebody selling a shrink-wrapped copy on eBay for $135 if you're really wanting to fork out. If German politics is your thing,
snap that up.
You know, yeah, go and snap that up. That's a bargain for you. But you know, if it's not, maybe not so much. But okay, right, we're going to wrap the episode up there. So that was episode 91 in the bag. So again, we're still counting down to episode 100, and I've run some ideas past you for what we think we should do with this. Are we quite keen?
Big things coming.
Big things coming for episode 100. I've rescued my keyboard from where it was hiding for the past couple of years, because I wasn't entirely sure where it was, but I found it. It needs a good clean. But yeah, we're going to go and work on the theme tune at some point soon. But we will give out all our internets, so if you want to email us, ask us questions, give us comments, any of that kind of thing, you can do that at firstplayertoken@gmail.com. That's FIRST. You can find us on a lot of the social media things, Facebook, Twitter. We have a Discord, we are on Stitcher, we have a PSN community, we're on iTunes, we have a YouTube. All our episodes go up onto SoundCloud. Our Twitter is at 1STPlayerToken.
Be careful, that's once the player token.
Thank you, Euan. Our Twitch channel, which is new and shiny, is also 1STPlayerToken.
That's once the player token. Just
Thank you.
Watch out.
Everything else is FIRST. I have to keep making this distinction.
Right.
And other than that, we are part of the Podnose Network,
UK's leading entertainment podcast network.
Any more news since last time, Euan?
Much the same. A network of wonderful podcasts about a variety of topics, of which we are but a
tiny
floating
fraction.
bit of driftwood in the sea of.
That's a lonely picture you've painted.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of podcasts on there, that's what I'm saying.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
thanks very much.
But we're the only one about video games.
And board games.
And board games.
Yes.
Which we're talking about today.
Well, that's podnose.com if you want to go and check out all the podcasts that are on there. As Euan says, we talk about video games, so we'll be doing that on the next episode. I think our next board games episode will probably be a couple of weeks, but we should say that we are attending Tabletop Scotland in a couple of weeks' time, so that's on the 1st and 2nd of September. We think we're only going to be there the 2nd of September, but we will be there.
See you in Perth.
Indeed, so that's in Perth, Scotland. They have a Facebook page, they have a Twitter account, all that sort of stuff, so if you want to go and check that out, they have a website as well. So yes, we will be back next week with a video games episode, but until then, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.